So he hailed then the new world created by the country's people as he warned foreign forces that attempting to bully the nation will get their heads bashed. Those are the words of the Chinese President Xi Jinping as he gave an hour-long televised address from Tiananmen Square to mark the centenary of the creation of China's Communist Party. Celebration events beginning a little earlier on, with fighter jets, in fact, marking the 100 years of the party, which began in such a small way, but now has more than 95 million members. The audience rising to sing the song, "Without the Communist Party, there would be no new China."
The Chinese people will never allow any foreign forces to bully, oppress, or enslave them. Anyone trying to do so will most certainly face bloodshed in front of a great wall of steel built by more than 1.4 billion Chinese.
Joining us here on set is Antoine Bondaz from the FRS, the Strategic Research Foundation. He's a specialist on China, Taiwan and the Koreas as well. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today. I mean, 100 years, first of all. It's incredible, isn't it, that the party has so much control for so long over the country. I mean, it really does dominate everything, doesn't it? Not just politics, but people's lives, the way the whole country functions.
Actually, Xi Jinping mentioned it a few years ago at the last party congress in 2017, and he reminded everyone that the government, the army, the education and the society, the party rules everything. And he added north, south, east and west, the party rules everything. So you have, of course, a clear depiction of the way that over the last few decades, and especially about the last few years, the party has been able to kind of double concentrate the power within the society, around the party, and within the party, around the figure of Xi Jinping. So for sure, today, more than ever, I would say, the party controls the Chinese society, controls the Chinese economy, control, of course, the life of billions, of more than 1 billion people.
And very few dissenting voices?
Less and less, we should say. For sure, Xi Jinping, since he came to power in the late 2012, as the new Secretary General of the party, has made sure to control voices. You can see that in mainland China, you can see that now in Hong Kong, and it's more and more difficult for any dissenting voice to be heard in China. It does not mean that there cannot be, of course, like in any other country, some, not rejection, but some criticism, but it's much more difficult for them to express themselves than, let's say, 20 years ago.
We heard in that speech as well, he warned foreign forces that attempting to bully the nation will get their heads bashed. I mean, presumably that aimed very much at the US. I mean, do you think the US should be worried about China and its spread?
Yeah, that sentence comes at the very end of the speech. What is quite interesting is the use of nationalism more broadly in China today and by the party especially. The very first part of the speech focused on the so-called national and century of humiliation caused by foreign forces, including Europeans, but also Americans. And what Xi Jinping is trying to do, but this is what the Chinese party, the Communist Party, has been trying to do over the last 3 decades, is to replace ideology by nationalism as a source of legitimacy. Does it mean that a conflict with the US is likely? I don't think so. It means that the party in itself needs this kind of tensions, need to showcase tensions with the US to also sustain its legitimacy. And just one very specific figure and data, from January to the end of May, if you take the editorials of the Global Times, one of the biggest newspaper in China, very nationalistic, among the 163 editorials published, 158, so 97%, focus on the US.
And we also saw earlier this week, didn't we, Xi Jinping talking with Vladimir Putin? I mean, is that something, presumably in the same vein, he's trying to do the same thing with that?
Also, what is very clear that they want to show that China is not isolated, that even though you have more coordination between US and its allies and partners, be it in Europe or in the Indo-Pacific, China is not lonely, China is not alone. And to showcase that rapprochement with Vladimir Putin, the proximity between China and Russia has been key and instrumental over the last few years, and they will keep, of course, showcasing it.
But you still think, although those two leaders are sitting down, that the US shouldn't be too worried about what's happening?
I mean, of course they need to worry, but I think you need to look at the situation in a very pragmatic way. No country, of course, is willing to enter into a military conflict with the US. You have growing tensions, you have de facto rivalry now, but that's not something new. The Chinese strategists, the Chinese politicians have been focusing on the Sino-US tensions for more than 3 decades, since at least the end of the Cold War. So it just actually, I would say, follow. What is key is that the rivalry, the direct rivalry and the confrontation between the US and China is, of course, increasing, is reinforcing. Does it mean that we are likely to have a conflict, a so-called Thucydides trap, etc.? I don't think so in the short term, but we will have tensions.
We've also had, of course, a lot of Chinese economic influence. I mean, we ran a programme recently on France 24, a reporters programme, about Chinese influence in Africa, in Zambia it was specifically. But I mean, that's something as well, which is really growing, isn't it? China getting its feelers into everything.
And for sure, let's say that is the biggest challenge for the US. The way that China now can challenge the US is on economic terms and using its economic leverages. We can see it through the Belt and Road Initiative. You can see it through the strategy of China to increase the dependency on so many countries on the Chinese economy. They are perfectly aware, and they have theorized it in official papers, that to confront the US, they need to start on the economic aspect, because they are not ready to confront the US on the political or on the military side. So the economy, for sure, is and will remain one of the key axes of confrontation and competition between China and the US. And by economy, you also need to add technology, norms, standards, etc.
And of course, we have to mention human rights as well. I mean, it's the issue, of course, that so many governments attack China over, notably, of course, the Uyghurs, but more generally as well.
For sure, and I'm sure they will keep doing it. So the human rights situation in China, in some part of China, is indeed deteriorating over the last few years. But what is also important for the Western, let's say, but more broadly the democracies, is that we are more and more into a systemic rivalry. The Chinese political regime is trying to discredit Western-style democracy, not only to reinforce its own legitimacy internally in China, but also to try to weaken some political regime outside. And the Biden administration has been quite clear, and it's quite interesting over the last few months, to say that we need also on our side to demonstrate and to show that democracy can deliver. And this is also an internal work we have to do in Europe, in the US, to show that our political regime are fit. They can also assure prosperity, security to its own people, because this is something, this kind of systemic rivalry, systemic confrontation, that will be more and more acute in the years to come.
So you don't think then that Xi Jinping is going to take much notice when European powers and US powers lecture him, if you like? I'm sure that might be the word he uses over human rights.
He said it actually in the speech. He said that we do not accept anymore the kind of student-master rhetoric. We accept and we can listen to kind of friendly advices, he said, but not to this kind of lecturing. For sure, they feel embarrassed, and it's a problem in terms of communication when Western countries, but not only Western countries, criticize China on human rights. Does it mean that it's going to force China to change? This is for sure a bit more complicated.
Good to talk to you, Dave. Thanks very much for coming in, talking to us today. Antoine Bondaz from the FRS Strategic Research Foundation. Thanks.
Thank you.